The first time I died, everyone applauded the girl who stole my voice. That is not a metaphor, even though for years I wished it was, because metaphors are easier to survive than memories. I still remember the heat of the auditorium lights burning through my blazer, the dry taste of panic on my tongue, the judges' faces lowered over their score sheets, and Serena Vale standing at the center of the stage with both hands wrapped around the microphone like she had been born holding it.
She was reading my speech.
Not inspired by it. Not accidentally similar.
Meaning.
Every pause I had practiced into the mirror. Every line I had written at 2 a.m. while my father slept in the next room with hospital bills stacked beside his bed. Every carefully built sentence about becoming more than the life people expected from me. She read it perfectly. Even the places where I had planned to let my voice tremble just enough to make the judges lean forward. And when she finished with my final line, when she whispered, "I do not want pity. I want proof that I was here," the whole hall rose for her. Teachers wiped their eyes. The principal pressed a hand to his chest. The scholarship panel exchanged that little look adults give each other when they think they have discovered a star. I stood behind the curtain, holding the empty folder she had left for me. My real name written on the label, my pages gone, my future gone with them. Then the stage manager shoved me forward because my name was next, and I walked out with nothing but my hands, my shaking mouth, and Serena's shadow stretched across the floor like a trap I had already stepped into. I tried to speak.
I really did.
I opened my mouth, and the silence that came out was louder than any speech I could have given. Someone coughed. Someone laughed. The judges glanced down. Serena sat in the front row, tears still shining beautifully on her cheeks, watching me fail with the softest, sweetest pity in the world. By the end of that afternoon, she had the National Speech Scholarship, a university recommendation, a mentorship with a senator, and a video of her performance spreading online under captions like, "Poor girl from nowhere moves entire auditorium." I had nothing except a reputation as the jealous classmate who froze because she could not stand being second. That was how it started. That was not how it ended. It ended 4 years later in a rain-soaked street outside the city broadcasting center, after Serena used that stolen scholarship to build a public career, after she accused me of plagiarism when I tried to expose her, after my father died believing my silence meant guilt, after the same people who had praised my stolen words mocked my real ones, after I saw her face on a giant billboard above traffic, smiling beneath the slogan, "A voice for the voiceless." I looked up at that billboard, laughed once because the universe had a cruel sense of humor, and stepped backward without seeing the delivery truck turning the corner. The last sound I heard was not screaming. It was applause, trapped in my skull, rising again for a girl who had never written a truthful sentence in her life. Then I opened my eyes in my old bedroom, 17 years old, 3 days before the speech finals, with my practice folder lying on my desk and Serena's message glowing on my phone. "Don't forget to bring your final draft tomorrow. We'll rehearse together like always." I stared at the message until the letters blurred, and then I laughed so hard I had to bite my wrist to stay quiet. I did not answer Serena right away. That was the first difference. In my first life, I had been grateful for every crumb of attention she threw me, because Serena Vale was the kind of girl teachers trusted before she spoke and students forgave before she apologized. She had honey blonde hair she never dyed, but somehow looked too perfect to be natural, a voice trained by private coaches, a laugh that made adults think she was harmless, and eyes that could turn wet at the exact second someone questioned her. She collected lonely people the way other girls collected earrings. She found the student with no mother, the boy with divorced parents, the transfer girl whose accent made everyone mock her, the scholarship kid who ate lunch alone, and she sat beside them just long enough to become their favorite person. Then, when they trusted her, she learned what they wanted most and quietly positioned herself between them and it. I had been her favorite project because I was useful and foolish. I wrote beautifully, but I was shy. I noticed people, but I trusted the wrong ones. I had a dead mother, an overworked father, a cracked phone, and a desperate need to believe that not every polished girl wanted to laugh at me. Serena gave me her old debate blazer when mine tore. Serena shared her lunch when I forgot mine. Serena told me I had a once-in-a-generation voice, and then asked if she could read my drafts because she loved them so much. I thought she was the first person who saw me. She was actually the first person who saw what could be taken. In that old life, I brought every draft to school, left my bag open beside her, let her flip through my folder while pretending to suggest improvements, and thanked her when she said my speech was too raw for competition. She told me judges preferred polish over pain. Then she stole the raw parts and polished them just enough to pass them off as bravery. When I woke again, my room looked exactly as it had before everything broke. The curtain rods still sagged in the middle. My father's cough still came through the wall in 2 tired bursts. The same scholarship brochure lay beside my lamp, promising full tuition, housing support, and a summer leadership program that could change one student's life. In my first life, I had circled the deadline in red and whispered to myself that this was our way out. In my second life, I picked up the brochure, smoothed it flat, and placed it under my palm like evidence. My phone buzzed again. Serena. Mara? You okay? Don't tell me you're still rewriting LOL. Send me the intro if you want, I'll fix it. I remembered her reading my intro under lights. I remembered the judges crying. I remembered my father's face after the rumors spread. Not angry, just tired in a way that said disappointment had finally learned his address. My hand stopped shaking. I typed back. You're right. I'm still rewriting. I'll bring the practice version tomorrow. She replied instantly with 3 hearts and a voice message I did not play. I knew what sweetness sounded like when Venom had learned manners. For the next hour, I did not cry, and that frightened me more than anything. In my first life, I had cried over everything. A kind comment, a bad mark, my father pretending he was not in pain, Serena saying she was proud of me. But Rebirth does something strange to grief. It does not erase it. It freezes it into something sharp enough to use. I sat at my desk and opened the blue folder I had once guarded like a holy object. Inside was my practice speech, the one Serena had stolen almost word for word. The title at the top made my stomach tighten, The Weight of Being Heard. I remembered every sentence. I remembered writing the opening after seeing Dad fall asleep in his work boots. I remembered shaping the middle around Mum's last voicemail, the one where she told me that having a small life did not mean having a small soul. I remembered the closing line because it had become Serena's most quoted phrase online. People printed it on posters. Schools invited her to repeat it. She wrote it in the dedication of her memoir, and nobody knew she had stolen it from a girl who could not afford a funeral headstone big enough for her mother's full name. I lifted the pages out of the folder and spread them across my desk. They looked innocent. Paper always looks innocent until someone uses it as a weapon. At first, I wanted to burn them. I imagined Serena reaching into my bag and finding ashes. Imagine her panic. Imagined her mouth opening and closing like mine had on stage. But revenge built on impulse is just another way of letting someone else control the timing. I needed more than panic. I needed proof. In my first life, that had been the problem. I knew she stole from me, but knowing is weak if everyone else profits from not believing you. Serena had not only stolen my speech, she had stolen it intelligently. She copied my folder at lunch, swapped my pages with a blank outline, and made sure the only people backstage were her friends. When I accused her, she cried and said I had helped her practice, that I must have confused my notes with hers because we had discussed similar themes. Her mother produced screenshots of Serena drafting lines I had never sent her, probably typed after the theft and backdated through some app one did not understand then. Teachers preferred her version because her version required less courage from them. This time, I would not run into the same knife and complain that it was sharp. I opened the new document. I titled it Old Practice Speech, Decoy. Then I began to edit my own stolen future into a trap. The trick was not to make the decoy obviously fake. Serena was greedy, not stupid. If I wrote something ridiculous, she would smell danger and take a different path. The speech needed to look like the old Mara, vulnerable, desperate, lyrical, too honest for her own protection. It needed to contain lines strong enough to tempt her, personal enough to expose her, and unstable enough to collapse the moment someone else tried to stand on it. So I kept the structure she loved. I kept the opening about silence. I kept the rhythm of the mother-daughter memory. I kept the emotional climb toward the final line. But I changed the bones. I added details only I could claim, and I made them impossible for Serena to explain. I wrote about the scar on my left palm from the night Mom dropped a glass in the kitchen, and I tried to help clean it. Serena's hands were perfect. I wrote about Dad teaching me to stretch 1 tin of lentils over 3 dinners. Serena's father owned 3 restaurants. I wrote about sleeping beside the washing machine during winter because our room heater broke. Serena lived in a house where every bedroom had its own bathroom. Those details alone might not stop her. She could always call them metaphors. So I buried something deeper. In the middle of the decoy, I inserted a paragraph about my mother's last voicemail, but I changed the quote into a line Mom had never said, a line I had never told anyone, a line that would later matter because I planned to register the real voicemail with a speech committee's authenticity file. I also inserted 3 awkward references to the red thread under my sleeve, a phrase that sounded poetic but actually pointed to nothing. If Serena read it, the judges might think it strange. If she tried to explain it, she would have to invent. Finally, near the end, I added one sentence that looked powerful enough for her to keep. I stand here with my mother's name stitched inside my cuff, because when the world erases poor women, daughters must become their signatures. It was a beautiful sentence. It was also a locked door. My mother's name was stitched inside my cuff. I had done it in my first life the night before finals, with blue thread, crooked letters, hidden inside my sleeve where nobody could see. Serena did not know that yet. This time, I would stitch the name again. This time, when she read that line, someone would ask her to show the cuff. I smiled at the page. Then I deleted the final line she had built her whole future on and replaced it with something close enough to tempt her, but different enough to mark the theft. I do not want sympathy. I want a witness. It sounded like me. It sounded like something Serena would want. It sounded like bait because it was. By midnight, my desk looked like a crime scene organized by a librarian. There were 3 folders: blue, white, and black. The blue folder held the decoy speech, printed on the same slightly cream paper I had used in my first life because our printer at home always made white paper look yellow. The white folder held blank pages under a title sheet because I knew Serena's friends were careless and might grab whatever looked easiest. The black folder held my real speech, but not the one from my first life. That girl's speech had been beautiful because it begged the world to believe pain mattered. The girl sitting at the desk now had already learned what the world did with pain when it arrived unprotected. My new speech had a different title: The Things We Practice Alone. It did not mention Serena. It did not accuse anyone. It did not need to. It was about the private work people do before public applause appears. It was about fathers who wake before sunrise, mothers whose voices remain in old phones, students who rehearse in bathrooms because their rooms are too loud, and the danger of confusing performance with truth. I wrote it cleanly, without the bleeding hunger of my old draft. I left spaces for silence. I built turns into it like hidden staircases. Halfway through, I wrote a line that made me stop and breathe. A stolen voice can impress a room, but it cannot answer questions after the microphone is turned off. I did not know if I would use it. It was too direct, almost too dangerous. Then I remembered Serena sitting in the front row with wet eyes while I collapsed, and I kept it. At 1 a.m, Dad knocked softly and opened the door. He was younger than the last time I had seen him alive, though illness had already drawn shadows under his eyes. He held 2 mugs of tea, one for him and one for me, and said, "You'll wear a hole through the floor with all that thinking." I nearly broke then, not because he said anything grand, because he was there. Because in my first life, I had spent so many years wishing for one more ordinary interruption. I took the mug and looked away before he could see my face. He glanced at the folders. Finals. I nodded. He leaned against the doorway and smiled in that tired way that made him look both proud and worried. "You don't have to win to prove anything, Mara." In my first life, I had believed him and still needed to win. In this life, I understood the sentence differently. I did not have to win to prove anything, but Serena had to lose to stop proving lies. I said, "I know, Dad. I just want to speak clearly." He nodded, as if that was all any father could ask of a daughter. After he left, I stitched my mother's name inside the cuff of my white blouse with blue thread. The letters were crooked again. I cried only when the last knot tightened. The next morning, Serena hugged me before I even reached my locker. That was her style, attack disguised as affection. Her arms came around my shoulders, her perfume sweet and expensive, her voice bright enough to make the girls nearby look over. "Mara, you look exhausted. Please tell me you slept." In my first life, I had melted under that concern. This time, I let my body stay stiff for 1 second too long, just enough for her notice, then relaxed into the hug like I remembered how to be fooled. "Barely," I said. "I rewrote too much." Her eyes flashed. "Not obviously." Serena never did anything obviously unless tears were involved. But I saw the small calculation, the tiny lowering of her lashes toward my bag. "I told you not to overthink it," she said. "Can I see?" I gave a nervous laugh and pulled the blue folder halfway out, then shoved it back as if embarrassed. Her gaze followed it like a cat tracking ribbon. "It's messy," I said. "I'm only bringing the practice version to rehearsal. The final is still—" I made a vague gesture, and Serena's face softened into encouragement, so perfect it should have been framed in a museum of lies. "That's okay. Practice versions matter. Sometimes they're more honest than final drafts." I almost admired her. Even her fishing hooks came wrapped in silk. Around us, the hallway filled with students talking about finals. The speech competition was not just a school event. It was the event. Our academy had won the National Student Oratory Scholarship 3 times in 10 years, and the winner usually received university recommendations, media attention, and access to donors who loved photographing themselves beside brilliant poor teenagers. For most students, it was prestige. For me, it was rent, tuition, medicine, escape. For Serena, it was another crown, but crowns were her addiction. She already had debate captain, student council vice president, regional essay winner, and the kind of family network that could open doors without her touching the handle. But she wanted the scholarship because it came with a story, and stories were more valuable than prizes. A rich girl winning because she was rich bored people. A rich girl winning with a poor girl's pain made them weep. That afternoon, we rehearsed in classroom B12 with the finalists. I placed the blue folder on my desk and excused myself to refill my water bottle. In my first life, I had done the same thing because Serena asked me to bring her tea. This time, I stopped outside the door, turned my phone camera on, and held it low through the glass panel. Serena waited 7 seconds. Then she moved. She did not rush. That was the thing about practice thieves. They knew panic belonged to amateurs. Serena leaned toward my desk as if looking for a dropped pen, placed her notebook over the blue folder, slid the folder beneath it, and passed both to Lila Chin, her loyalist shadow, who tucked them into a tote bag covered in debate pins. Then Serena placed a nearly identical blue folder back on my desk. My original first life self would have returned, seen the folder, and noticed nothing until the stage swallowed me. This time, my hand stayed steady around the phone. I recorded Lila's tote bag. I recorded Serena's calm face. I recorded the folder switch. Then I walked away before they could see me. In the bathroom, I gripped the sink and breathed through a wave of rage, so old it felt inherited. The video was not enough by itself. Videos could be questioned, angles doubted, intentions twisted. But it was a start. When I returned, Serena was laughing at something one of the boys said. She looked up with perfect innocence. "You okay? You took forever." I lifted my bottle. Line was long. My blue folder sat on my desk, fake and empty. I opened it just enough to see the blank outline she had left for me. Title, bullet points, empty spaces, the same shape of theft as before. For one dizzy second, my vision doubled. I was backstage again, 17 and ruined, my mouth full of silence. Then the classroom door slammed open and Mr. Alden, the speech coach, entered with a stack of forms. The sound cut through the memory like a blade. "Finalists, authenticity declarations today," he said. "After last year's essay scandal, the committee requires digital submission, draft history, and a brief Q&A after each speech." Serena's smile did not move, but her fingers tightened on her pen. That was new. In my first life, there had been no Q&A. Or maybe there had been, and Serena had arranged to avoid it. Rebirth was not a perfect copy. The world had small differences, and small differences could become trapdoors. Mr. Alden handed out forms. You'll upload your final speech by midnight tomorrow. What you perform must match the submitted version. No exceptions. Serena turned to me, with concern painted over hunger. Mara, your draft history must be a nightmare, with all your rewrites. I smiled weakly. Probably. The truth was, my real speech already had a clean draft history, timestamps, voice memos, handwritten notes, and a sealed copy in the counselor's office under the pretext of scholarship documentation. In my first life, I trusted people after disaster. In this life, I built evidence before the door opened. By lunch, the rumors began, which meant Serena had moved to stage 2. The first rumor was gentle. Mara was struggling. The second had teeth. Mara's speech sounded too similar to Serena's theme, and Serena was worried but too kind to say anything. The third arrived by last period. Mara might withdraw because pressure made her unstable. I watched the rumors travel through the school like smoke under doors. In my first life, I had tried to stamp out each one individually, exhausting myself while Serena stayed clean. This time, I let them spread. Smoke shows where the fire exits are. I sat alone behind the library shelves and listened to Lila whisper to 2 junior debaters. Serena basically coached Mara for weeks. If Mara does well, it's because of Serena. If she crashes, Serena will still comfort her. She's too nice. The juniors nodded because people nod at confidence even when it carries no facts. I wrote their names in the back of my notebook. Not for revenge.
For pattern.
Serena never acted alone. She acted through soft echoes. At 3, Mr. Alden called us in pairs for feedback. Serena went before me. I waited outside his office with a fake folder in my lap while her voice floated through the door, warm and trembling. She was already practicing my decoy. I heard the line about lentils. I heard the washing machine. I heard my mother's fake voicemail. My nails dug into my palm. She had not even changed enough. That was arrogance. Or hunger. Maybe both. Mr. Alden's voice was muffled, but I heard one phrase clearly. Very moving. Serena came out with damp eyes and an embarrassed laugh. Sorry, she said to me, dabbing her cheek. Your turn. Her performance was good. Of course it was. Theft does not mean lack of talent. Sometimes the worst people are talented enough to make stolen things shine. That is why they get away with it. I enter Mr. Alden's office and place the fake folder on the desk. He glanced at it. How are you feeling? In my first life, I had said nervous. This time, I said, careful. He looked up. Careful. I slid him the authenticity declaration, already signed, with a note requesting that my final submission remain confidential until performance due to concerns about draft security. His eyebrows lifted. I did not accuse Serena.
I did not even say theft.
I said, I've had materials moved from my bag before. Maybe accidentally. I want to make sure the version I perform is the version I submit. Mr. Alden studied me for a long moment. He was not a bad man in my first life, just a weak one. Weak adults are dangerous because they prefer confusion over conflict. But sometimes if you hand them a process instead of an accusation, they will follow it because process feels safer than courage. He nodded slowly. Submit directly to me as well as the portal. I'll timestamp it. I thanked him. As I left, Serena was waiting by the trophy case, pretending to check her phone. I walked past her without slowing. Behind me, she said softly, Careful, Mara. People can tell when someone is hiding something. I turned just enough to meet her eyes. I hope so. That night, I rehearsed my real speech in the laundry room because Dad had fallen asleep early and the apartment walls carried sound like gossip. The washing machine clicked beside me, old and uneven, and the air smelled like detergent and metal. I spoke to my reflection in the dark window until my face stopped looking like a ghost. The things we practice alone, I began, and my voice at first belonged to both versions of me. the girl who had died, and the girl who had returned. I stumbled on the second paragraph. I changed a transition. I cut one sentence that sounded like pleading. I practiced silence after the line about stolen voices until it became not an accusation, but a bell. A speech is not just words. Serena had taught me that by stealing mine. A speech is timing.
Breath.
The decision to look at the audience when they want you to look down. The courage to let a sentence land without rushing to protect it. In my first life, I had written beautifully, but performed like I was apologizing for taking space. In this life, I had already lost everything once, and that does terrible, useful things to fear. At 11, I uploaded the real speech through the committee portal. I emailed it to Mr. Alden. I printed 2 copies and sealed one in an envelope for the counselor, Ms. Hart, who had once told me quietly after my father's funeral that she wished she had asked more questions when Serena won. In that old timeline, regret arrived too late to matter. In this one, I gave her a chance to become early. I also uploaded the video of Serena switching my folder to a private drive and sent myself a time-stamped email with no message, only the file attached. Then I opened Serena's social media. She had posted a photo of her desk. Candle, fountain pen, blurred pages, captioned. Sometimes a speech hurts because it's honest. The blurred pages were mine. My decoy. I zoomed in until the cream paper filled the screen. The line about my mother's name stitched inside my cuff was visible, though slightly out of focus. Hundreds of students had liked it. Comments called her brave. I set the phone down carefully because throwing it would only hurt me. Dad knocked again, softer this time. Still awake. I opened the door. He leaned against the frame in his old cardigan. You're going to make yourself sick. I wanted to tell him everything. I wanted to say, Dad, she stole from me once and you died before anyone believed me. I wanted to say, I came back and I am scared that if I blink, the world will correct itself and take you too. Instead, I said, can I ask you something? When Mum used to speak at community meetings, was she nervous? He smiled, and for a second illness left his face. Terrified. She used to write notes on her hand, then wash them off before anyone saw. Said courage was just fear, with clean sleeves. I looked down at my stitched cuff. Clean sleeves. Crooked thread. Proof hidden where only I knew to look. That sounds like her, I whispered. Dad touched my shoulder. It sounds like you too. The day before finals, Serena changed tactics. She came to school with red eyes and no makeup, which for Serena was not vulnerability, but costume design. By first period, everyone knew she had barely slept because her speech was too emotionally difficult. By second period, Lila announced in chemistry that Serena might not perform because her trauma was too real to turn into a competition. By break, 3 teachers had told Serena she was brave for even considering going on stage. I watched the machine work and almost laughed. She was preparing the audience to reward her before she spoke. That was the genius of her cruelty. She did not simply steal words, she built weather around them. If people expected pain, they would hear pain. If they expected sacrifice, they would call theft honesty. Near lunch, she found me behind the arts building, where I had gone to breathe. The sky was low and gray, pressing the school into a dull shine. Serena held 2 coffees. Peace offering, she said, extending one. In my first life, I would have taken it because refusing kindness felt rude. In this one, I looked at the cup until she lowered it slightly. I don't drink coffee before rehearsals. Her smile flickered. Since when? Since now. She laughed softly. You've been different this week. I leaned against the brick wall. Have I? A little cold. She tilted her head, eyes soft. I know competition is stressful, but I hope you don't see me as an enemy. I care about you. Pattern interrupt. A football hit the wall beside us, so hard the coffee in her hand jumped. A group of boys shouted apologies from the field. Serena flinched, and for the first time that day, her face did something unplanned. Coffee splashed onto her sleeve. A brown stain spread over the white cuff. I looked at it. She looked at me looking. There it was, the cuff. My line. My trap. Her expression smoothed itself back into place, but not fast enough. I should clean this, she said. I said, you should. She stepped closer instead. Mara, can I be honest? I'm worried your speech and mine overlap. Not because anyone did anything wrong. We've shared so much. But if the judges notice, they might think. She let the sentence die tragically. Think what? I asked. She sighed. That you borrowed from me. There was stage 3, delivered before she even committed the theft publicly. In the old life, she waited until after winning to accuse me. This time, she wanted me frightened enough to withdraw first. My heart beat once, hard. Then I smiled, not wide, not dramatic, just enough to make her blink. Then it's good we both have draft histories. Serena's eyes held mine. Draft histories can be misunderstood. So can people, I said. The warning passed between us like a match in a dark room. She left with the coffee stains still spreading on her sleeve. That afternoon, something unexpected happened. Ms. Hart, the counselor, called me into her office.
I had not planned that.
Not exactly. I had left the sealed envelope with the front desk, but I expected it to sit unopened until needed. Ms. Hart was a quiet woman with silver-threaded hair and the kind of calm that made students confess things accidentally. In my first life, she had approached me weeks after finals, after Serena's victory had hardened into public truth, and asked if I was all right. I had said yes because by then every honest answer sounded like self-pity. Now she held my envelope in one hand and my authenticity declaration in the other. Mara, she said, I don't want to make assumptions, but this is unusual. I sat with both hands folded in my lap. I know. Are you concerned someone may take your work? I looked at the bookshelf behind her, at the tiny ceramic bird on the top shelf, at the framed poster that said students deserve safe voices. Adults loved posters. Posters never had to act. Yes, I said. Do you know who? A name rose in my mouth like blood. I swallowed it. I know enough to protect myself. I don't know enough to make an accusation without being called jealous. Ms. Hart's face changed. Not much. Just a tightening at the corners of her eyes. Has that happened before? In another life, yes. In this one, not yet. I said, it happens to girls like me before anyone bothers to keep records. She leaned back slowly. That is a very heavy sentence. It's a heavy week. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she did something I had not expected. She opened her drawer, took out a school evidence form, and placed it between us. If you submit a concern about academic integrity, the school is required to preserve related materials confidentially. It does not trigger punishment by itself. It creates a record. A record. In my first life, I had screamed truth into a room with no record, and truth evaporated. I picked up the pen. My hand did not shake. I wrote that my practice folder had been moved during rehearsal, that an altered copy might be used by another competitor, that I was submitting my final speech separately and requesting comparison if overlap occurred. I did not write Serena's name. Ms. Hart read it, then looked up. You're being careful. I learned late, I said. I'm trying to learn early. She signed the witness line. The pen made a small scratching sound. It was not applause. It was better. It was the sound of the world becoming slightly harder to lie to. Finals day arrived cold and bright, the kind of morning that makes windows look innocent. I woke before my alarm and lay still, listening to Dad move around the kitchen. In my first life, this day had smelled like toast and fear. I had worn the white blouse with Mum's name stitched inside the cuff, tucked my speech into the blue folder, and checked my bag 12 times. I had believed preparation was protection. This time, I knew preparation was only protection if you prepared for people, not just performance. I dressed slowly. Navy blazer, white blouse, dark skirt, hair pinned back, not because it looked pretty, but because I did not want to hide behind it. I touched the stitched cuff once. Mum's name sat against my skin like a secret heartbeat. Dad was at the table with tea and overcooked eggs. He had taken the morning off work, which in our house meant the world had tilted. I'll come if you want, he said too casually. In my first life, I told him not to because I did not want him wasting wages. Then, after everything, I wished he had been there, not because he could have saved me, but because one person in the audience might have known my silence was not emptiness. This time I said, "Please." His face changed so quickly he looked away. "Then I'll wear my good shirt." His good shirt had a frayed collar. He ironed it anyway. On the bus, I watched the city pass in broken reflections. At a traffic light, a billboard showed a university advertisement with a smiling student holding books to her chest. In my first life, Serena's face had taken over billboards. In this life, the space was still blank enough for other futures. My phone buzzed. Serena had sent a message to the finalists group chat. "No matter what happens today, I'm proud of everyone for sharing their truth." Lila responded with a crying emoji. 2 others sent hearts. I typed nothing. Truth does not need a group chat announcement. When we reached school, the auditorium doors were already open. Parents, teachers, students, donors, judges, local reporters. Everyone moved through the foyer in small clusters of perfume, wool coats, and expectation. The scholarship banner hung above the stage, Speaking Futures Final Showcase. I stared at the word futures until it split into 2 meanings, the one stolen from me and the one I had come to steal back. Backstage smelled of dust, hairspray, and hot cables. Finalists moved around with note cards and water bottles, whispering lines to themselves. Serena stood near the mirror in a pale blue dress instead of school uniform, a choice designed to make her look softer than the rest of us. Her hair fell in loose waves. Her cuffs were clean, not stitched, not marked. My decoy line waited inside her speech like a glass shard wrapped in velvet. She looked at me through the mirror and smiled. "You look calm." "So, do you?" "I guess we're both ready." "I guess we are." A stagehand called the first speaker. The competition order was pinned beside the curtain. Serena was 4th. I was 6th. In the old life, Serena had gone right before me, which made the theft feel like a public execution. This time, there was one speaker between us. Another small difference. Another breath. Mr. Alden moved down the line, checking names, folders, microphones. When he reached me, he paused. "Final version?" he asked quietly. I tapped my temple. "Memorized. A copy is with you and Ms. Hart." He nodded, then moved on. Serena watched that exchange. Her smile thinned. She had expected me to cling to whatever fake folder she left me, expected me to panic when I opened it backstage, expected me to either withdraw or stumble through fragments while she floated on my stolen sentences. Instead, I held no folder at all. Her eyes dropped to my empty hands. "No notes?" she asked. "No, but ab." "No," I said. Practical. Before she could answer, the lights dimmed. The principal stepped onto the stage and welcomed the audience. Applause rolled through the curtains. My body remembered dying. Not the truck, not the rain, but this, the sound of a room becoming a verdict. My lungs tightened. For one terrible second, I was behind the curtain in the old timeline again, holding emptiness. Then Dad's cough sounded from somewhere in the audience. 2 short bursts.
Familiar. Alive.
I breathed. The first 3 speeches passed like weather I could not feel. A boy spoke about climate anxiety with too many statistics. A girl spoke about her grandfather's migration with a beautiful closing image of shoes by the door. Another student made everyone laugh about failure and exams, then surprised them with a sharp turn about shame. The audience was warm, the judges attentive. The trap was set inside normalcy, which made it more dangerous. Then the host read Serena's name. Applause swelled before she reached the microphone.
Of course it did.
Serena had been collecting sympathy all week like kindling. She walked into the light with her chin lowered, as if humility had weight. I stood behind the curtain where I could see her profile. She placed her pages on the podium, inhaled, and let silence gather around her. I knew that silence. It was mine. She began with my decoy opening, and for the first 30 seconds, she was brilliant. "There are silences people respect," she said, voice low, "and silences people mistake for emptiness." The hall stilled. A judge looked up. Serena's rhythm was flawless. She knew where to pause, where to let her voice thin, where to make pain look freshly opened. When I was 8, she continued, my mother taught me that being unheard is not the same as having nothing to say. Her mother sat in the second row wearing pearls, perfectly alive, perfectly confused for half a second before arranging her face into solemn pride. I almost laughed. Serena had not considered that my dead mother would become inconvenient when placed beside her living one. But the audience did not know enough yet. They leaned in. She moved into the lentil line, then the washing machine line. A murmur shifted somewhere near the teacher's section. Mr. Alden's head lifted. Ms. Hart, seated at the aisle, became very still. Serena felt it, but she was too far in to stop. That was the cruelty of stolen performance. Once you built emotion on false ground, retreat looked like confession. She pressed forward. We slept beside the washing machine that winter because it was the only place the pipes gave off heat. Her father, restaurant owner, donor, man whose family home had heated floors in the bathrooms, frowned. A student in the front whispered something. Serena's voice trembled beautifully. She mistook suspicion for emotion and gave them more. My mother's last voicemail told me that small lives do not mean small souls. My hands closed at my sides.
Fake water.
Fake grief. Fake daughter. But the tremble in her voice was real now. Not guilt.
Fear.
She had reached the part of the road where the bridge was missing. Then came the cuff line. I knew it was coming before she turned the page, because her right hand hovered half a second too long, like her body wanted to protect her from her own mouth. But ambition is louder than instinct. Serena lifted her chin, eyes shining, and said, I stand here with my mother's name stitched inside my cuff, because when the world erases poor women, daughters must become their signatures. It was a devastating line. The audience reacted exactly as she hoped at first. A collective inhale, one teacher pressing fingers to lips, a judge's pen stopping midair. Then Ms. Hart stood up. Not dramatically, not like a movie. She simply rose from her aisle seat with the calm of a woman following procedure. Excuse me, she said, clear enough to cut through the microphone's faint hum. The host froze. Serena froze harder. The audience turned. Ms. Hart looked toward the judging table. As this competition includes authenticity verification and post-speech questions, I request that the speaker clarify the personal object reference before proceeding. The line refers to a visible or verifiable item. A ripple moved through the auditorium. Serena stared at her as if a statue had spoken. The principal half rose, confused, but one of the judges, a woman with steel gray hair and no patience in her face, leaned toward her microphone. That is a fair clarification. Ms. Vale, would you be comfortable showing the cuff or explaining the reference? It was such a small question. Show the cuff. Explain the reference. In my first life, nobody had asked Serena anything after she stole my grief. They let applause be the only evidence. This time, a single adult asked for the door to open. Serena looked down at her sleeves. Pale blue fabric.
No stitching.
No name. Her mind moved visibly behind her eyes, searching for exits. It's symbolic, she said softly. Good. Predictable. The gray-haired judge nodded. Symbolic in what way? Serena swallowed. The microphone caught it. My mother's name is carried with me. Her mother shifted in the second row, pearls flashing. The judge glanced at the printed speech before her. The wording says stitched inside my cuff. Serena's lips parted. The silence changed. It was no longer respectful. It was hungry. Backstage, Lila whispered, "Oh my God," so quietly I almost did not hear. Serena tried to smile. I mean that metaphorically. Like a daughter carries. Continue, the judge said, but her pen moved. That pen movement was the first crack in Serena Vale's public face. Serena should have stopped there, pretended emotion overwhelmed her, asked for water, abandoned the line, and saved what she could. But Serena had never survived by surrendering. She survived by doubling down until other people became too uncomfortable to challenge her. So she continued. The next section was about my scar. There is a scar on my left palm, she said, and this time even the students murmured, because Serena's hands were wrapped around the podium, smooth and unmarked under the stage lights. She realized too late and curled her fingers inward. A scar from trying to clean broken glass before my mother could step on it. The judge with gray hair looked at her hand. Mr. Alden looked at me backstage. I did not move. The speech was eating her alive, sentence by sentence. That scar taught me that love is not always soft, Serena said, but her voice had lost its warm center. She was performing damage control while reading a map of someone else's wounds. Then she reached the red thread. For years, I wore a red thread under my sleeve. Her eyes skipped, searching ahead, maybe realizing she had not prepared an explanation for a phrase that meant nothing. A red thread that reminded me, she paused. A real pause, not a crafted one. The audience heard the difference. The old Serena would have turned that pause into tears, but now tears would invite questions, and questions were no longer safe. Reminded me that even when nobody sees what holds us together, it is still there. Not bad. She was talented. I give her that. She could weave a lie while falling. But the judges were no longer leaning forward with wonder. They were leaning forward with suspicion. She rushed the ending. I do not want sympathy, she said, voice rising. I want a witness. The line landed, but not the way she wanted. Witnesses had been summoned. Witnesses were listening. The applause that followed was scattered, uncertain, almost embarrassed. Serena bowed too quickly and left the stage, her face pale beneath the makeup. The host stepped forward with a brittle smile and announced a 5-minute pause before the Q&A portion, citing technical adjustments. Technical adjustments. Adults have such soft names for public collapse. Backstage erupted without making much noise. That was the strangest part. Disaster in places full of polite people sounds like whispering, not shouting. Lila grabbed Serena's arm. What was that? Why did Hart ask that? Serena shook her off. Not now. Her eyes found me. For the first time in 2 lifetimes, Serena looked at me without costume.
No pity. No sweetness.
Just raw calculation sharpened by fear. She crossed the backstage area so fast the stagehand stepped aside. What did you do? She hissed. I looked at her empty cuffs. I listened. You set me up. With whose speech? Her mouth closed. Behind her, Mr. Alden approached with the principal and Ms. Hart. Serena saw them and changed instantly. Tears rose. Shoulders softened. Voice broke. Mara, I don't understand why you're doing this. If you were upset about our drafts being similar, you could have talked to me. There it was. The old trap, sprung early. But early traps are easier to see. The principal looked between us. What is going on? Serena turned to him, trembling. We rehearsed together. We shared personal stories. I think Mara may feel, I don't know, threatened. She hated using such a clumsy word, but panic makes artists sloppy. I said nothing. That irritated her more than any argument. She continued, tears spilling now. I would never take anything from her. I helped her all week. Mr. Alden looked older than he had that morning. Serena, the speech you performed contains several details from a confidential concern Mara filed yesterday. Serena's tears paused. Not stopped. Paused, like even they were waiting for instructions. A concern? Ms. Hart held up a folder. Mara reported that a practice folder had been moved and that an altered copy might be used by another competitor. She submitted her final speech and related materials before your performance. Lila's face strained. Serena looked at me, then back at the adults. That doesn't prove anything. She could have written that after seeing my draft. The concern was filed yesterday afternoon, Ms. Hart said. Your final speech was uploaded at 11:47 last night. Mara's sealed copy was submitted before that. The principal rubbed his forehead. Serena, did you have access to Mara's practice materials? We shared, Serena said quickly. Everyone knows that. I finally spoke. Then you should have messages where I shared the lentil dinners, the washing machine, the scar, the cuff, and the fake voicemail quote. Her eyes flashed at the word fake. Too fast. Ms. Hart caught it.
So did I.
So did, I think, Serena's mother, who had appeared near the backstage entrance with pearls trembling against her throat. Before anyone could continue, the host called for the Q&A to resume. The judges wanted Serena back on stage. Serena's face changed from fear to fury and back to fragile confusion in less than 3 seconds. "I'm not going back out there to be humiliated," she whispered. The principal lowered his voice. "Refusing the Q&A may affect eligibility. This is harassment. It is the competition process." Her mother stepped forward. "My daughter is being targeted." Ms. Hart did not flinch. "Then the Q&A will give her an opportunity to clarify." That sentence was merciless because it sounded reasonable. Serena turned to me one last time. "You think this makes you look innocent?" she said under her breath. "No," I said. "I think my speech will." She stared, and in that moment she realized something she should have realized sooner. I was not holding pages. She had stolen a practice speech from a girl who no longer needed it. The host announced her name again. The auditorium clapped politely, confused. Serena walked back into the light like someone approaching a cliff because the crowd behind her still expected grace. The gray-haired judge adjusted her glasses. "Ms. Vale, thank you for your patience. I have a few questions about your speech. You mentioned a scar on your left palm. Could you tell us how that memory shaped your later advocacy work?" Advocacy work.
She could have invented something.
She had invented entire childhoods between breakfast and lunch. But the problem with detailed lies is that they require emotional geography. She knew the line, not the life around it.
"It taught me to protect people," she said.
"In what specific way?" the judge asked. Serena blinked. "To notice danger before it hurt someone." "And the red thread?" another judge asked. "Is that a cultural reference, a family practice, or personal symbolism?" Serena's mouth opened.
Closed.
Opened again. Personal symbolism. Connected to what? Memory. What memory? A long silence. Somewhere in the audience, someone whispered, "Does she not know?" The microphone heard it. Serena heard it. Her face crumpled, but the tears now looked less like vulnerability and more like a curtain catching fire. When Serena finally left the stage after Q&A, the applause was smaller than silence. The host, pale and sweating, announced the 5th speaker. The poor boy had to follow a public unraveling, and I felt sorry for him. He spoke about community gardens while half the audience processed the fact that the school's golden girl might have just performed someone else's poverty. His speech ended. People clapped too loudly, grateful for anything normal. Then my name was called. Mara Ellison. In my first life, that name had been a sentence before I even opened my mouth. This time, it sounded like a door. I stepped onto the stage with empty hands. The lights hit my face. For a second, I could not see the audience, only shapes and brightness. Then my eyes adjusted. Dad sat in the 3rd row, his frayed collar visible under his jacket, hands clasped so tightly his knuckles were white. Ms. Hart sat near the aisle. Mr. Alden stood at the side. Serena was backstage, but I could feel her attention like cold breath through the curtain. I reached the microphone and did not touch it. My old self would have gripped the stand, as if the room might throw her off balance. My new self let both hands rest at my sides, cuffs visible, blue thread hidden inside one sleeve. "The things we practice alone," I said. My voice sounded calm. Not because I was not afraid, because fear had finally learned its place. Most people meet courage only after it has dressed for the occasion. They see it on stages, at podiums, in interviews, under lights bright enough to make even trembling look polished. They think courage is a public thing because applause is public. But the truth is, most courage is rehearsed where nobody claps. The room settled, not the same way it had for Serena. Her silence had demanded emotion. Mine invited attention. I spoke about Dad leaving before sunrise, tying his shoes in the dark, so he would not wake me. I spoke about Mum practicing community meeting speeches over boiling rice. I spoke about the little private rituals people perform before they become visible, rewriting one sentence 20 times, washing uniform by hand, memorizing a paragraph in a bathroom mirror, choosing not to quit when quitting would be easier to explain. I did not accuse. I did not need to. The stolen speech had made the room suspicious. My real speech made them understand what suspicion was protecting. Halfway through, I reached the line I had almost cut. My eyes found the judges, then moved past them to the students. A stolen voice can impress a room, I said, but it cannot answer questions after the microphone is turned off. The auditorium went so still, I could hear the faint buzz of the lights. I let the silence stand. Not too long. Just long enough for the sentence to choose its own witnesses. Then I turned away from accusation before it could become the whole speech. That is why practice matters. Not practice as performance. Practice as ownership. The hours alone are not empty. They are where a person becomes answerable to her own words. The gray-haired judge leaned back, pen still. I continued. I told them about my mother's last real voicemail, not the fake line Serena had read. I did not quote the whole thing because some things are not for rooms, even rooms that finally listen. I said only that Mum had told me to keep my sleeves clean and my heart stubborn. Dad laughed once, a broken little sound, because he knew the sentence. I unbuttoned my left cuff and turned it slightly, showing only the inside seam to the judges, not the whole audience. Her name is here, I said. Not because grief needs proof, but because I do. The blue stitches were crooked. They looked nothing like Serena's polished performance. They looked like a girl sitting at midnight with thread and a memory she refused to outsource. The room breathed. I buttoned the cuff again. But this speech is not about my mother dying. It is about what she practiced while alive. She practiced telling the truth in rooms that preferred comfort. She practiced showing up when nobody promised her fairness. She practiced giving me a voice that did not depend on being believed by everyone at once. I saw Ms. Hart lower her eyes. I saw Mr. Alden swallow. I saw Serena's mother standing at the side, very pale. So today, I said, nearing the end, I am not asking you to feel sorry for anyone. Sympathy is too easy. Sympathy lets people clap and go home unchanged. I am asking you to respect the unseen labor behind every honest voice you hear. Ask what it cost. Ask who carried it. Ask whether the person speaking can stand beside the words after the stage is empty. My final line came not as a whisper, but as a steady offering. I do not need to be louder than anyone else. I only need to leave the stage with my voice still mine. For a moment, nobody moved. Then Dad stood. He stood awkwardly, as if his knees hurt, which they probably did. He clapped once, then again, and the sound broke whatever spell held the room. The applause rose, not the explosive worship Serena had received in my first life, not the viral kind, not the kind that crowns someone instantly and stops thinking. This applause was slower, deeper, almost uncomfortable, because people were not only praising me. They were admitting something. I bowed because that was what contestants did, but I did not lower my eyes. When I walked backstage, Serena was waiting in the shadow near the curtain. Her makeup had cracked around her eyes. Lila was nowhere near her. That mattered. In stolen glory, Serena always stood surrounded. In exposed uncertainty, she stood alone. For one breath, we were the only two people in the narrow dark between stage and storage room. You ruined me, she said. Her voice was flat now, stripped of sugar. I looked at her, really looked at her, and felt something strange. Not pity. Not forgiveness. Recognition, maybe. Serena had spent her life believing admiration was oxygen. A person like that will steal breath from anyone and call it survival. No, I said. I left you with your own words. You just didn't have enough. Her face twisted. You think they'll choose you now? After this mess? Committees hate scandal. Maybe. I shrugged. But I'll know what I said. That angered her more than any threat. Because the thing she stole from me first was not the scholarship. It was the right to trust my own mouth. A stagehand called the next finalist, and people moved between us, breaking the moment. Serena stepped back into shadow. I returned to my seat in the finalists' row. The rest of the speeches continued, but the competition had changed shape. Every speaker now seemed more real simply because everyone was aware of how easily reality could be staged. A boy forgot a line and recovered with an honest laugh. A girl admitted during Q&A that she had exaggerated a childhood memory in early drafts but corrected it because it felt wrong. The judges listened harder. The audience clapped with more care. Serena did not sit in the front row. She remained backstage until someone from administration asked her to wait in a side room with her parents. After the last speech, we were dismissed for deliberation. The foyer filled with noise, so thick it felt physical. Students pretended not to stare at me while absolutely staring. Teachers spoke in low clusters. Donors looked uneasy, which meant someone had threatened the cleanliness of their inspirational afternoon. Dad found me near the water table and pulled me into a hug before I could decide whether I was too old for one. He held me carefully because he was not as strong as he pretended, and I held him carefully because I knew exactly how breakable time could be. "Your mother would have thrown a shoe at anyone who tried to speak after that," he said into my hair. I laughed, and the laugh nearly became a sob. "Was it okay?" He pulled back, offended. "Okay? Mara, you made a judge look like she wanted to adopt you and arrest someone at the same time." That startled a real laugh out of me. Then his face softened. "I'm proud of you, not because of the prize. Because you sounded like yourself." In my first life, I had spent years wanting someone to say that. Hearing it now felt like getting oxygen after learning to breathe underwater. Across the foyer, Serena's mother argued with the principal. Her father stood behind her, jaw tight, phone pressed to his ear. Serena sat on a bench near the office doors, arms folded, staring at the floor. For once, nobody rushed to comfort her. Not because they hated her, because uncertainty makes cowards out of admirers. Lila hovered near a vending machine, pretending to text. When she saw me looking, she turned away. Ms. Hart approached quietly. "Mara, the judges may ask you a few verification questions before results." "Okay." "You did very well." Coming from her, the sentence weighed more than applause. "Thank you for standing up," I said. She looked toward the auditorium doors. I should have stood up sooner in many situations. That was not quite an apology, not for the old life she did not remember, but it touched the edge of one. I accepted it with a nod. Mr. Alden joined us, holding a tablet. He seemed ashamed, though of what exactly I could not know. Maybe for almost praising Serena into victory. Maybe because he knew how close he had come to doing it. "Mara," he said, "your submitted draft matches your performance except for minor phrasing. Serena's submission substantially matches the practice document you flagged." He paused. "The committee is reviewing whether to disqualify." I felt the old hunger flare. Disqualify her, expose her, make the rooms say thief until the words stuck. But beneath it was a deeper need, not punishment, but correction. "Will the record say why?" I asked. He nodded slowly. "If the decision is made, yes." Good. Records mattered. Records outlived tears. The judges called me into a smaller room 15 minutes later. It had a round table, water glasses, and a poster from last year's winner smiling beside a politician. I wondered if Serena's poster would have hung there in the old life.
Probably.
The gray-haired judge introduced herself as Dr. Elian, retired professor, scholarship chair, not someone who enjoyed nonsense. I liked her immediately. "Mara," she said, "we're going to ask standard questions first, then a few related to authorship. Take your time." Standard questions were easy because they belonged to my real speech. Why did I choose unseen practice as my theme? How did I balance personal narrative with broader social meaning? What would I do with the scholarship? I answered plainly. I told them I wanted to study public policy and law, not because I dreamed of power, but because I had learned too early that rules only protect vulnerable people when someone insists on enforcing them. One judge asked about my mother's influence. I answered without performing grief. Another asked about my father. I glanced through the glass wall and saw him in the foyer, pretending not to look nervous. He taught me that dignity is not quiet because it is weak. Sometimes it's quiet because it is busy surviving. Dr. Elian's pen moved. Then came authorship. "You filed a concern before today's performances," she said. "Why did you not name a specific competitor?" I took a breath. Because I knew how it would sound. How would it sound? Like jealousy from someone with less social proof. The judges exchanged a look, not dismissive. Interested. "And now," she asked. "Now I still prefer evidence to volume." Dr. Elian almost smiled. "Good answer." They asked about the cuff, the voicemail, the draft history, the decoy. I did not call it a trap. I called it a practice version with personal markers after concerns about draft security. That was true enough. Revenge is safer when it can survive formal language. Finally, Dr. Elian folded her hands. Did you intend for another competitor to use that practice version? The room tightened. There it was, the question that separated protection from sabotage. I met her eyes.
No.
I intended for my own work to stop being easy to take. She held my gaze for a long moment, then nodded. Thank you. When I left the room, Serena was waiting outside with her parents. Her mother's eyes cut into me. Her father looked at me like I was a legal problem. Serena looked at me like I was a mirror she wanted broken. Serena's verification interview lasted much longer than mine. Through the glass, I saw her cry, then argue, then cry again. Her mother tried to enter twice and was stopped twice. Lila was called in briefly. That surprised me until I remembered the video. Lila had carried the folder. In my first life, she had posted vague comments about some people not handling pressure. This time, pressure had her name on it. When she came out, she looked smaller. She did not look at Serena. She looked at the floor and walked straight to the bathroom. That was the moment I knew the circle had broken. Serena could control followers when loyalty cost nothing. She could not control them when adults started writing things down. The principal announced another delay. Parents complained. Students speculated. Someone had already posted a short clip of Serena being asked about the cuff, but the school Wi-Fi was slow, and the video kept buffering under captions like, "What just happened at speech finals?" I knew how quickly stories could spread. In my first life, the internet carried Serena upward and buried me beneath comments. This time, I did not want the internet to be judge, jury, and executioner. Not because Serena deserved mercy, but because public hunger distorts everything it touches. I wanted the official record first. Still, the clip existed. The world had begun to turn. Dad brought me a packet of crackers from the vending machine and insisted I eat. I did, because reborn or not, daughters with anxious fathers must sometimes chew to calm them down. Around us, people whispered my name differently. Earlier, they whispered it like a question. Now they whispered it like an answer they were embarrassed not to know sooner. A younger student approached me with trembling hands and said, "Your speech was really good." She looked like she wanted to add more but feared becoming part of the scandal. I smiled. "Thank you." She glanced toward the office. Did she really? Then she stopped. I could have fed the rumor. I could have said yes, she stole it. She stole everything. Hate her properly for me. Instead, I said, "The judges are handling it." The girl nodded, disappointed by my maturity. I understood. Revenge in imagination is always louder than justice in procedure. But procedure was what I had lacked before. I would not trade it for the cheap sweetness of gossip. When the auditorium doors reopened, the air inside felt different. Everyone knew something had happened, but not everyone knew what they were allowed to know. The finalists sat in a row on stage. Serena's chair was empty. Then, just before the host approached the microphone, she entered from the side and sat at the far end. Alone.
No Lila.
No mother beside her. No cluster of admirers. Her face was composed, but the composition was fragile. The principal took the microphone first, which was unusual. Before results are announced, he said, voice formal, the committee wishes to address an eligibility matter. Following review of submitted materials and verification interviews, one finalist has been withdrawn from award consideration due to a breach of authorship guidelines. As this involves student records, details will remain confidential. Confidential. The word landed with both mercy and violence. It spared Serena the full public naming, but the empty space around her named her anyway. A wave of whispers moved through the hall. Serena stared straight ahead. Her hands were folded in her lap, cuffs clean, palms hidden. In my first life, she had stood in the center of applause with my words in her mouth. In this life, she sat at the edge of the stage while formal language took the crown out of her hands. The host resumed, overbright, and announced commendations. The boy with the community garden received honorable mention, which felt fair because surviving after Serena's collapse deserved something. The girl with the migration speech won second place. Then Dr. Elian took the microphone for the scholarship award. She did not smile for the audience. She looked down at the card, then up at me. This year's Speaking Futures Scholarship is awarded to Mara Ellison for a speech that demonstrated not only craft and emotional intelligence, but a rare understanding of integrity as a lived practice. Applause rose again. My body reacted before my mind did. I stood. My legs felt untrustworthy. Dad shouted once, my name, I think, though it came out broken, and several people laughed kindly. I walked to the microphone because winners were expected to say something short. In my first life, Serena had thanked the school, her family, and everyone whose quiet strength inspired me, while my stolen pages sat in her bag. This time, I looked at the audience and said, "Thank you. I'm grateful for the scholarship, but I'm more grateful that today, questions were asked. Please keep asking them, especially when someone quiet is the one who needs you to." It was not polished. It was not viral. It was mine. Afterward, Serena disappeared before the photos. Her parents left through the side exit. Lila cried near the bathrooms, surrounded by two girls who looked unsure whether comforting her counted as betrayal. The school tried to restore celebration. Photos were taken. Donors shook my hand. Dr. Elian gave me her card and said, "Write to me when you're ready to discuss university options." Mr. Alden apologized, but carefully, with sentences like, "I wish I had been more attentive to dynamics around shared drafts," which was adult language for "I nearly failed you." I accepted because this life was already different, and I did not want to spend it collecting apologies like unpaid bills. Ms. Hart walked Dad and me to the foyer. "There will be follow-up," she told me. "The school may ask for additional statements." "I'll give them." Dad looked between us, confused and increasingly alarmed. I had not told him the full story yet. Not there. Not under banners and fluorescent lights. Outside, the afternoon had turned windy. The scholarship certificate felt too light in my hands for something that had once weighed enough to kill me. "Dad," and I walked to the bus stop in silence. Halfway there, he stopped. "Mara," he said, "did someone try to take your speech?" I looked at him. The old instinct rose. Protect him, minimize it, carry it alone. Then I remembered my own words. The things we practice alone should not become the things we suffer alone. "Yes," I said. His face went white with anger, a rare and frightening thing on him. "Who?" I looked back at the school, where the auditorium roof shone under the cold sun. "Someone who thought I would know how to prove it." He breathed out slowly. "And did you?" I held up the certificate. "I'm learning." He pulled me into another hug, this one tighter, less careful. For a second, I let myself be 17. Not reborn. Not strategic. Just a daughter with her father's hand on the back of her head, standing on a street where the truck from my old death would not arrive for years. If it arrived at all, in a future I had already begun to bend. The scandal did not explode immediately. That surprised me, though it should not have. Institutions do not explode when truth enters them. They seal doors, hold meetings, choose verbs, and try to decide how much honesty they can afford. The school sent a formal email that evening. One finalist had been withdrawn for breach of competition rules. The scholarship result remained valid. Students were reminded not to speculate online. Naturally, speculation online multiplied within 10 minutes. Clips spread. Someone slowed down Serena's cuff moment. Someone compared her speech to old social media posts where she showed her family's heated ski cabin. Someone dug up an interview where she said she had never experienced financial hardship but felt deeply connected to stories of resilience. By midnight, half the school believed she was a criminal mastermind. The other half insisted she was the victim of a jealous setup. In my first life, online judgment had crushed me because I had no official record to stand on. This time, I logged out. That was a victory nobody clapped for. The next morning, Serena did not come to school. Lila did, but she moved through the hallway like a person trying not to leave fingerprints on air. At lunch, she approached my table. I was alone, eating rice from a container Dad had packed too full. She stood there clutching her tray. Can I sit? I looked at the empty chair. In my first life, Lila had laughed when Serena called me unstable. She had carried the stolen folder. She had built little bridges for Serena's lies and then crossed them safely. I wanted to say no. I also wanted information. Sit, I said. She sat. For a full minute, she rearranged peas with her fork. Then she whispered, I didn't know it was yours. I gave her a look. You thought Serena needed to secretly swap my folder because she enjoyed stationery? Her face reddened. She said you were spiraling and asked her to help clean up your draft. She said you were embarrassed and might panic if people knew. The explanation was stupid. It was also exactly the kind of stupidity Serena cultivated in others. Not ignorance, but convenient belief. And yesterday? I asked. Lila swallowed. Yesterday, I told them she gave me the folder before you came back. I told them I put the other one on your desk. I said I didn't read it. Did you? No, she looked up, eyes wet. I really didn't. I just did what she asked. That was the oldest excuse in history, and maybe the most common. I did what she asked. I looked at her for a long moment, then stopped being the kind of person people can use as a hand. She flinched.
Good.
Some sentences should bruise. She nodded, stood, and left her tray untouched. I did not forgive her, but I did not need to carry her either. Serena returned 3 days later. By then, the school had transformed her absence into mythology. Some said she was suspended. Some said her parents hired lawyers. Some said she had fainted and been hospitalized, which made her supporters whisper that everyone had gone too far. When she walked into English, conversation died so quickly the teacher's marker squeaked across the board and stopped. Serena wore her uniform perfectly. No makeup except lip balm. Hair tied back. Face pale but controlled. She looked less like a fallen queen than a queen visiting ruins she intended to reclaim. The teacher, poor Mr. Voss, greeted her too brightly. Serena took her seat without looking at anyone. Her seat was beside mine. Of course it was. The universe enjoys symmetry almost as much as cruelty. For 10 minutes, we copied notes on persuasive techniques. Ethos. Pathos. Logos. I nearly smiled at the board. Serena's pen moved steadily. Then she slid a folded note across the gap between our desks. I stared at it. In my first life, I would have opened it instantly because Serena's attention felt like weather. This time, I left it there until the bell rang. Only when the room emptied did I unfold it. You don't understand what you've done, it said. This will follow me forever.
No apology. No denial.
Just consequence framed as injustice. I turned the paper over and wrote, then carry it honestly. I left it on her desk. At the door, she said my name. I turned. She stood between rows of desks, sunlight cutting across her face. Do you feel better? She asked. It was a clever question. If I said yes, I was cruel. If I said no, she still owned part of me. I thought of the billboard in my old life. The truck. Dad's funeral. My mouth on that stage with nothing inside it. Then I thought of my real speech, my father standing, my mother's name against my wrist. I feel awake, I said. Her eyes hardened. People loved me before this. I know. They'll remember that. Maybe. I adjusted my bag strap. But now they'll remember to check your cuffs. Her face cracked, and I left before she could repair it. The official consequences arrived slowly. Serena lost the competition, then debate captaincy pending review, then her student council position, to focus on personal growth. The phrase annoyed me, but I understood it. Schools prefer growth language because it makes damage sound like gardening. Her family appealed the decision. The appeal failed because the records were too clean. My concern filed before her submission, my real draft history, the video of the folder switch, Lila's statement, Serena's inability to verify central claims in her speech. Still, the school did not publicly call her a thief. They called it misuse of peer materials. That phrase made my jaw tighten. Peer materials. As if my life were a worksheet passed around during group work. But Dr. Elian wrote me a private email that mattered more. Institutions often soften language, she said, but records are read differently by those who know what to look for. Preserve your copies. I did. I preserved everything. Not because I wanted to live forever in the wound, but because forgetting too quickly is how people like Serena rewrite the room. The scholarship process moved forward. Forms, interviews, financial documents, recommendation letters. Dad and I spent one evening at the kitchen table filling out housing paperwork while he pretended not to cry over the tuition coverage. He kept saying, "This is a lot," as if naming the size of relief could make it less frightening. I watched him sign a parent declaration and felt the old timeline loosen another finger from my throat. In that life, he had died working extra shifts after my scholarship vanished. In this one, maybe he would still get sick. Maybe some things could not be outrun. But money was time, and I had won us some. A week after finals, I visited Mum's grave with the certificate folded in my bag. The headstone was still small. Her full name still did not fit. I knelt in the grass and touched the blue thread inside my cuff. "I did not let her keep it," I said. The wind moved through the cemetery trees. No voice answered. I did not need one. Some silence is not emptiness. But rebirth is not a clean victory lap. People imagine getting a second life means walking through it with all the answers. It does not. It means carrying memories nobody else shares and trying not to become monstrous with the advantage. For weeks after the finals, I checked every folder twice. I distrusted compliments. I recorded conversations more than I should have. When someone asked to read my work, my stomach tightened. When teachers praised me, part of me searched their faces for future betrayal. Trauma does not vanish because the plot turns in your favor. It changes costumes. One afternoon, Ms. Hart found me in the library staring at a blank document. "Scholarship essay?" she asked. I nodded. The prompt was simple: describe a challenge that shaped your voice. I hated it. Challenges are expected to become inspirational once they are safely in the past. Mine still had teeth. Ms. Hart sat across from me. "You don't have to turn harm into a lesson before you're ready." Scholarship committees love lessons. Scholarship committees can survive honesty. I looked at her. Can schools? She accepted that hit without flinching. Sometimes. When students force us to. I almost apologized, then didn't. She deserved the discomfort. So did I, maybe, but not for the same reason. "I keep thinking," I said, surprising myself, "that I should have stopped her earlier. Before stage. Before she humiliated herself. Before everyone watched." Ms. Hart's expression softened. "You filed a concern. You protected your work. You did not force her to perform that speech. I made it tempting. You made your stolen work identifiable." That sentence settled slowly. There is a difference between setting a trap and labeling your own door. Serena had chosen to enter. Still, I thought of her alone on stage, reading lines that tightened around her with every breath, and I wondered if the old me would have hated the new me. Maybe. The old me believed being kind meant leaving exits for people who had already locked her in. The new me believed kindness without boundaries was just a prettier word for surrender. I typed the first line of my essay. The challenge that shaped my voice was learning that being believed is not the same as being truthful, and being truthful is not enough unless truth is protected. Ms. Hart read it upside down and smiled. "That sounds like a beginning."
It was.
Serena tried one final move near graduation. I should have expected it. Cornered people with reputations to salvage often discover accountability language. She requested a mediation meeting, claiming she wanted restorative closure. The phrase arrived through the deputy principal in an email full of neutral sentences. I almost refused. Then I thought of the note. This will follow me forever. I wondered whether she had learned anything beyond fear. Ms. Hart offered to sit in. I agreed on one condition. The meeting would be documented. Serena agreed, which told me she either had a strategy or no better option. We met in a conference room after school. Rain tapped the windows, soft and steady. Serena sat across from me with a notebook she never opened. Ms. Hart sat at the end of the table, pen ready. For a while, nobody spoke. Then Serena inhaled. I want to apologize for using parts of your draft without proper permission.
Ist sehr daher.
Parts. Her jaw tightened. For using her draft without proper permission? Ms. Hart's pen paused. Serena's eyes flicked toward her. For taking it, she said finally, each word dragged out like glass. And for performing it. The room seemed to exhale. It was not enough. Of course it was not enough. But it was the first honest sentence I had heard from her in either life. Why? I asked. Serena looked down. Because I wanted to win. Too simple. Too true. Then she added, and because people expected me to. There it was, the self-pity trying to enter through the side door. I did not let it. People expected you to win, so you stole from someone who needed the scholarship? Her cheeks flushed. You think I didn't need things? Not my mother. The sentence hit hard. Serena's mouth trembled, but no tears fell. Maybe she had used them all. Maybe she knew they would not work here. I didn't think of it like that, she whispered. That was the problem, I said. You didn't think of me as a person. You thought of me as material. Ms. Hart wrote that down. Serena saw and flinched. Good. Records again. She tried to meet my eyes. I am sorry, Mara. I believed she was sorry. I did not believe she was sorry for the same reasons I needed her to be. But sometimes the first version of remorse is ugly, selfish, and still better than denial. I hope you become someone who understands what that means, I said. But I'm not helping you get there. Her face fell. She had wanted forgiveness as evidence. A signed receipt she could show herself, and maybe others. I did not give it. The meeting ended with formal notes, agreed boundaries, and a statement that she would not contact me outside necessary school matters. Restorative closure, it turned out, could include a locked door. The months that followed were quieter, and quiet felt suspicious at first. I finished school. I accepted the scholarship. Dad started taking fewer shifts after Dr. Elian connected us with a financial aid advisor who knew how to talk stubborn men into accepting practical help. Lila joined a different lunch group and stopped orbiting powerful girls. Mr. Alden introduced a new rule for competitions: no unsupervised shared drafts, sealed submissions, mandatory Q&A, and explicit authorship training. The school called it the Ellison Protocol, which embarrassed me so badly I avoided the staff room for a week. Serena transferred before final exams. Officially, her family wanted a fresh environment. Unofficially, nobody knew how to look at her without seeing an empty cuff. I heard rumors after she left. Some cruel, some sympathetic, most probably false. I tried not to collect them. My life was finally requiring my attention. University letters arrived. So did bills. Dad had good days and bad days. I began volunteering with a community legal center because Dr. Elian said my anger had excellent administrative potential. I learned that injustice often survives not because nobody knows, but because nobody writes it down in time. That became a kind of obsession. Forms, dates, copies, statements. Not glamorous, not dramatic. But neither is a lock, and locks matter. On the anniversary of the speech finals, not the old death date, but the new beginning, I received an email from an unknown address. No subject. I almost deleted it, then opened it carefully. It was from Serena. I won't contact you again after this, it began. I used to think being admired meant being safe. I know that does not excuse anything. I am working with a counselor. I have started writing speeches I am too embarrassed to show anyone. They are not good. That is probably fair. I am sorry for taking your words and your story. I am sorry for making you prove what should have been yours. You do not have to reply. I read it twice. Then I archived it. I did not reply. Not because I wanted to punish her forever. Because some apologies are meant to be placed down, not picked up. Her growth belonged to her. My peace belonged to me. Years later, people would ask me when my life changed. They expected me to say it changed when I won the scholarship, or when Serena was withdrawn, or when the audience stood after my speech. But the truth is smaller. My life changed the night I sat at my old desk with 3 folders and chose not to burn the stolen speech. Fire would have felt good. Fire would have given me a moment. Instead, I made a record. I made a decoy.
I made a new speech.
I stitched my mother's name inside my cuff and decided that if someone wanted to steal my voice, they would have to carry the weight of every detail they had never lived. That was the night I stopped confusing innocence with helplessness. That was the night I understood that being a good person did not require being an unlocked room. Sometimes I still dream of the first auditorium. In the dream, Serena reads my old final line, and the whole hall rises. I stand behind the curtain with empty hands, trying to scream. But lately, the dream changes. The applause fades. A pen scratches. Someone asks a question. I look down and find my speech not in a folder, not in Serena's hands, but inside my own mouth, waiting. Then I step forward. Not to accuse. Not to beg.
To speak.
And when I wake, my wrist sometimes aches where the blue thread touched my skin, though the blouse is long gone and my mother's name now lives in places no one can steal, on documents, in records, in the quiet, stubborn shape of the life I built after refusing to disappear. Serena once told me practice versions were more honest than final drafts. She was right, just not in the way she meant. The practice version was the girl who trusted too easily, cried too quietly, and believed a stolen speech meant the end of her story. The final draft was the girl who came back, swapped one folder alone, walked on stage with empty hands, and left with her voice still hers.